So here we are. We're going to try to talk a little bit about the differences between Medium and Quill. I'm starting off in Medium. Um the window size is a little weird, so we'll figure that out. But I just started the app, and you start off like kind of in a gray world. Main difference between the two software is they're both from Facebook. They're both Oculus apps, and uh, this one is Medium is more for kind of sculpting. So let's just look. So immediately you kind of have this cursor in front of you, and on my right hand, this joystick is controlling the size of my brush. You get two buttons. Your top button is your color picker, and then your bottom button is your settings, which changes per brush type. And on my left hand, I have left, right is undo, redo. I have up, which is my tools palette, and a couple of settings. And then down, I can get access to the scene graph. I can see what add layers and adjust things. And then also same thing where there's context sensitive menus based on the type of layer you're on. You can get different settings, so you could center things, do booleans, flips, increase your resolution, decrease it, settings for your material settings for that specific layer that you're messing with, and manipulation tools for moving around that object based on rotation scale. And then based on that, you can get other, so you can also reset back to zero. There's a lot of options basically. So that's just kind of like your tools. So you start off basically with and your triggers are your back one, or your top one, which is your index finger, is your kind of base action, and then your both of your middle fingers are your world, so you can kind of grab and move and scale with both of those, kind of like Minority Report style, which translates across both of them. So anyways, let's see here. So let's say you're just like sculpting something, and you're just kind of using this spray foam brush to, ooh, there's my mic. Sorry, I'm sitting at my desk while I'm doing this, so it'll be interesting how many things I hit while I'm here. So you can sculpt and you're doing things, and then if you hold, this is kind of the Alt trigger on your right hand, your index finger gives you access to a secondary tool, which you can see this arrow on this tool palette is which tool is currently set to secondary tool. You can set to any of them. It's just kind of like your kind of quick switch. So then you can kind of smooth out things. Let's go through the brushes. You have clay, which you can do positive, and it's kind of like wherever your cursor is where you're going to add it. So you can make this really small, and you could get in here and add in some like fine detail, right? And then you could also, let's see here, if I double tapped the settings button, since I'm on clay right now, that would set it to red, which is harder to see on red, but that is subtraction. So you can go in there and just subtract, and then you could smooth out that with the smooth tool. And again, since we're talking about the clay, the settings for your clay are you can add or erase. I double tapped the settings, which switches automatically between the two. And then you can kind of pick your base shape that you're using. You can do stamps, which, it's nice if you had decals, if you wanted to bring in certain models and you wanted to put little buttons or whatever on your geo. Scale, which is also controlled by your thumbstick here. You can change what type of stroke, single, your thickness, or your stroke taper, sorry. And then you can also do steady stroke, which is kind of cool. So you could say you were trying to add a very specific line and you wanted it to be straight, kind of like in Photoshop, you can try to get a nice like steady stroke. So that's let me turn that off real quick, because I don't want that on. And then all these menus are kind of context sensitive, so whenever your cursor is over them, it is active, and then as soon as you move off, it goes away. That's that. You have a move tool, which lets you grab and move, which is pretty cool for like adjusting things. And all of this is based around your controller movement. So say if like you see my controller upside down and I grab this and then I rotate it around, you would get like a weird, crazy, distorted thing. The move tool, again, context sensitive, so it has size, you can choose what mode. All of these have a little bit of videos to help you understand what is happening. The shape, you can also change the shape, and then your inner radius, which, like, if you see right now, it's kind of really small in the center, you can adjust that. There's swirl, which swirls or destroys. That has settings too. Flatten, which is pretty cool. You can do, let's see here if I bring this closer. Flattens, and it's kind of based on this axis that you're in space. So say if I was trying to create a nice like flat edge there, I mean obviously I went really far and ate into that other side, but if I made that smaller, fix that. So that's that tool, and there's a bunch of settings for that. Oh, there's not a bunch of settings. You can constrain it to the surface, which is cool. Cut adds in cuts, and that has two settings. Inflate is kind of fun. You can look at sections of your model. Let's see here. And add, or say if you had detail that you liked. I don't know why it's not doesn't like that. Interesting. Maybe this is where I sculpted, so let me switch back to clay real quick and just sculpt. As I hit the mic again, told you. Maybe if you had like details like this, and then you wanted to inflate that, maybe, yeah, there it goes. It likes that. And then also you can deflate if you held the top trigger here. Do it the other way as well. Smooth, which, you know, like, is kind of context sensitive too, so like the closer you are, you're kind of smoothing out details, and the wider you go, kind of the wider, broader smooth it's going to do. And there's also some cool options on that. You can do flatten, average, or fill, so that kind of like adjust how it what it thinks you want to do with your smooth, so that's pretty cool. And then the last one is paint, and the paint has a couple of options. Same thing, you can double tap and switch between brush and spray. You can choose size, opacity, and then if you pick a color, so let's say I do like a blue, you could, you know, spray on your model and do some cool colors. And then now that we have like something in front of us, we can kind of go back to this menu where I was showing the settings for this. So right now it's a default material. We have a light in here, which is up over there. Let me see if I go to my light layer. There it is. I can move this light around, and you can kind of see. Oh, again, I'm going to just keep nailing that microphone and make it really hot. So you're going to add light to your scene. You can add multiple lights. You can see the shadow down there. And yeah, so that'll help us look at the, let's go back to the scope. Ooh, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go back to our scope layer, and you can see our diffuse color we can play with, and the light, specular, roughness, occlusion, and then there's a metal material. And then if I make a, let's go back to this layer, which apparently I did on a separate layer. I didn't mean to do that. You can go to this layer, and we could set this to like emissive. And you can see how it just makes it like a pure solid color. So you could do lights or, you know, glowing things like that. Yeah, so that's kind of like the real quick overview. What's nice is you can also bring in meshes. If you had something on your computer, I have no idea where stuff is on my computer. Let's see if I just try to look real quick. I think it's in myself, 3D, OBJ, objects. Let's just grab something simple, like, I don't even know what this stuff is. Pumpkin? What is a pumpkin? Let's grab a pumpkin. Where's our pumpkin? Ow. there it is. It's really tiny. Close that. That little pumpkin there. You could bring a pumpkin and sculpt on it. It's really small. Anyways, and what else is there? There's images. You could bring in a reference image. You could bring in a reference image. Place that in your scene so that you could have references you're sculpting. And then this giant thing in front of me is the lathe. You can do lathe, and you could also do mirroring. Both cool things. There's grid snap. So you could let me switch back to my clay tool. That's grid snapping. Yeah, so I mean that's kind of like a quick overview, just like what's there. It's pretty interesting. People are making amazing stuff with this if sculpting is your bag. So let's switch over to Quill and take a look at that. It's really hard because these are such like dense apps to like kind of quickly jump between this stuff, but at least you can kind of see them and kind of understand what's going on. Okay, we're in Quill. You don't get the cool controllers in here, so it's harder to show you what I'm doing with my hands, but your right hand, same thing where your index fingers is your kind of main source for drawing, and your right middle finger controls your world, and then again with both of them you can scale and move your world. Let me switch real quick to check the screen size here. There, I think that'll work. It's aligned better. All right, let me switch back to Quill now. All right, so that's your main controls, right? And then on your right hand, you have your main menu. And then your second button toggles selection, so you can select and delete stuff and scale, if I undo that. And your undo redo is on your right hand in this app. So I could undo, and then you could, like I said, you could scale, so I can move this around. Ooh, I'm gonna keep hitting that mic because I cannot see it. There's so this is your move, but I could also scale. And yeah, that's kind of your basic premise. Then you can move around your world easily. So with this is more based on kind of drawing strokes in space rather than sculpting forms. Same thing though, you can go to your, I'm going to the timeline here, and you could bring in an image. If you had an image for reference, you could also bring in a 3D model. So we could try to do the same thing just to show you. We'll go to D, myself, 3D, OBJ. Let's just do like, I thought I just had like primitives in here that would be easier to look at, but apparently just not knowing where my things are right now. Oh, geometric. Yeah, that's easy. Pyramid bevel. And that is, where? Did we bring it in? Oh, it's just big. We're inside of it. Well, easy. We're just gonna pretend whatever. You could do that. I'm just bad at picking random things to bring in. Either way, you could bring in an image, or let's just do an image. Let's see if I can do a 2D image. Let's go to textures. Let's do animal, leather. There you go. There's your image. If you had an image that you're bringing in that you wanted to match or bring to your scene or pull colors from or all kinds of stuff, you could do that. I'm going to make a new, I'm already on a paint layer. So the overview of this, you can look at examples, which is cool because you can see what amazing shit people are making. Goro Fujita makes a lot of amazing stuff and a lot of tutorials, so if you haven't seen his work, you should definitely check that out. We could load up something just so you can see what is happening inside of Quill. So again, this is more drawing and animation. So they've added a lot of animation tools recently. So there's some cool things happening. Let's see here. Got a couple of characters moving. You can add translation keyframes and you can loop those. So he's added a couple of transform keyframes where he's moving that around. The ground is frame by frame painting, so it just seems like it is moving really fast. There is no lighting, so all of the lighting that you see is done by brush strokes. We can pause this. So everything like the shadows are basically just a paint layer, and then the characters you see, he's basically taken and drawn strokes. He makes these primitives where he creates spheres and then moves them around and plays with them to get shapes. Then you can kind of grab and select and move things. Yeah, so this is interesting. Let's look at another one real quick. So this is like a cityscape. It's really cool, like futuristic looking. He has some flying cars again with like transform keyframes, and then the rest is just kind of flat brush and strokes, and then he kind of painted a fog just so things feel like they're coming in and out of the environment there. Let's go back to a new project though, just so we can go back to a white world. That's just so blinding. Let's just make a default color. All right, that's your examples, your transform settings. You could, this is your brush palette. This is kind of like your main one. I can grab it and place it, or you can hold it. And if you grab and place it, you can also grab from the top up here and move off. So you could have all of the panels out if you really wanted. Again, I'm going to keep hitting my mic. This is the timeline. You can collapse that to be just layers. So that's pretty much all the windows, right? So we have your paint. I'm going to close these and grab them all again. Paint, you have brush types. So let me switch colors real quick. You have a spherical brush, which you can draw. Down here at the bottom, you can turn on the mesh helper, which helps like if you're trying to see where your brush is. It's kind of helpful to see where those other strokes are. Without that, you know, if I was drawing that, it's kind of hard if you get color on color to tell exactly where your brush is, and so you get kind of confused once you're in the center. So it's nice to be able to, if I set this to maybe like half opacity, different color, you can kind of see where I'm at, what I'm doing, because since you can't see me. Moving in a circle and upwards, you can kind of draw with the sphere. There's a kind of ellipse. It's all pressure sensitive with the trigger, so as I'm releasing, it's scaling and tapering, which you can also adjust. But that is a tapered. There's a flat version of that as well, which is just, there isn't that much dimension. It looks the same. I don't really understand the difference between those two. This is the rounded ribbon, which is a much flatter, plainer looking brush. And as you get from different angles on that, you can see. Let me just grab this colors. And I'm gonna put this here so that I know that my mic's there. Yeah. Come back to here. We have a cylinder brush, which is pretty close to what the capped cylinder brush is. And the ellipse, which I showed. Ribbon, which is just a flat version of that. And a cube, which gives you a nice dimensional stroke. And all of these also have, you can hold the index finger on your left hand. You can hold that down. There's a lot of shortcuts in here as you kind of progress. You figure it out. You can draw. Again, I just closed it. I should have known you were there. You can draw straight lines. So that's cool. And then again, back with the selection tool, you could select things, grab it, duplicate, or just like scale. So there's that. And what else is here? Let's see. Let me deselect that. So we have all these strokes. These are all in one layer. There is a line tool, which is the same thing as just holding that trigger down like I was doing a second ago. Animated brush option means like, that gets a little complicated into timeline and stuff. Let's come back to that, but you can basically just have it record your stroke. Or here, I'll just show you. Let's just try to do that as quick as possible. We're gonna create a new paint layer. We're gonna create, we're gonna hide this. We're gonna add some blank keyframes. We'll just add like 22, that's fine. And we're gonna hit this button, which loops it. We're gonna go back to the beginning, hit play, and now we can just draw, and it's gonna record what we're drawing. So if we go back to our brushes, you can see that that's 1 second. So if I drag this up to or 0.1 second, now it's 1 second. So now if I did that again, you can see the stroke is hanging out for much longer, and then it's just staying there basically. You can just play with the timing and have like different stroke timing, or you can do really, really short. So that's pretty interesting and amazing. And the other thing that we can do is you could also do, again, I jumped into animation straight away, but we're already here. So now we have this animated layer. We could use the grab tool and like move things. And since it's kind of like the puppet tool in After Effects where you're moving over time, it's like animating while you're moving. So that's a pretty fun way of adding animation. And it shows you like onion skinning to show where your first and last frame was. And then it's nice, you get this like yellow kind of timer around your cursor there based on how much time you have left, so you can see that go around and fill in. You could play with that. There's like, I don't know if you can animate the thickness. That's weird. There's a nudge tool, which kind of just pushes things slightly, which I think in motion, if I click in on my left hand, you can see the onion skinning. You could just nudge this per frame too. So I could, on my left hand, if I move per frame, you could just do frame by frame animation. This also works with brush strokes, so I could switch back to just a brush, and I could hand animate. If I go back to frame 1, I could see a brush there. This is obviously more tedious, but it gives you that kind of control over your animation as well, kind of frame by frame, instead of just having the brush recorded in time. So then we could play that again, and you could see that brush that I animated there. So that's cool. That's fun. That was a jump from brushes directly into animation, but again, that's just kind of like how this is working here. The timeline again, so let's just finish the tools and maybe we can come back. So now that we have this animated, we can kind of keep letting that play. So right here, the next tool is Colorize. So you can pick the strength of it, and then you have all your different kind of blending modes like normal, kind of in your traditional applications. So if I grab this and pull this over here so that I don't know where my microphone is, I could say over time that I want the color of this to do green down here. And again, same thing, it's kind of recording over time, so you could do that, or I could stop and then do it frame by frame if I really wanted to have that much control over it, So that's cool. And then there's a lot of different modes. So you could do add, you could, everything. Opacity, if you wanted to drop the opacity of certain things, certain places, you could have it drop in opacity, saturation, all of that good stuff. There's a lot of really cool things that can be done with that. Again, Goro's, I think, tutorials are way better than this. It's just kind of like me dancing quickly, as quick as I can through this stuff. Erase, as you would imagine. And selection is selection options. So say you had multiple layers, you could select this, so you can select everything, or it's just kind of isolated or per layer. So that's an interesting option. The grab tool, which I was kind of showing, lets you manipulate by grabbing. And again, it's like that 6-axis where like however I move my hand is how this thing is moving. And then this also has a fall off, so you can make it strong, which has no fall off. So it's just a hard linear edge, or you could decrease it and have like a really smooth fall off. And I'm doing that by holding my index in on my left hand and the index on the right hand. That's the grab. There's a thick and thin. So say you had an illustration and you thought you drew everything with one single like size, you could go in and kind of reduce down or make bigger certain sections of your stroke. Nudge, which I showed, kind of just moving things around. And then optimize, you know, you can see the mesh here. You can optimize current layer and just get, if you were going to export this out as an FBX, it's much lighter geometry, I would assume. Excuse me. And so that's kind of like the basics of just the overall tools here. And then you could, oh, one thing that's cool, it's like paint tools. You could, if you're hovering over an area, you can press the B button on your right hand and sample a color, which is nice when you're doing dense scenes and you have a bunch of different colors and you want to sample. Some people kind of do the traditional kind of Photoshop thing where you have like your color palette floating in front of you so that you can always see your colors, but you don't want to do that on an animated layer because it's going to disappear. And cool, so that's that. Let's jump back into timeline and show some of the basic keyframing that you can do. So let's add a new painting layer. Let's do something like we're going to make a carrot here. Oh, wow, that was a terrible carrot. Let's try this one more time. We're going to make a carrot here. And our carrot is going to have some green at the top. And our carrot is going to have a cool cartoon outline. And our carrot is going to have eyes. And some weird legs. Maybe his eyes need to be, have some little whites in there so he's not as creepy. And that's our carrot. It's our carrot guy, right? So let's say we had him, we're going to use our selection tool, grab him. And selection tool, we're just going to bring him down to our grid just so we have an idea of where he's at. Now again, with the selection tool, you can do a lot of things. You can also move the pivot. So say you wanted to rotate him just on the X, you could do that. We're going to get rid of our colors for now. You can rename layers, so let's call this carrot. And then we're going to set a keyframe, and I don't know what that thing is. Let's try it one more time. Let's go to our first keyframe, click our transform. We're going to grab him, slide him here. And now, for whatever reason, that works, and you can see here, and I'm going to turn off the onion skin for now. So that works. He slides there. The thing that I saw in a Goro video that was like really helpful is that there's no copy and paste right now. So if you wanted this to be a loop, you know, like you want him to go back to the same place, what you should actually do is go to their second keyframe, delete it, set a keyframe so that you have two of the same keyframes, and then go to your middle, and then, you know, you could add a keyframe here, and then he would, you know, move forward and move back. I really don't understand what I'm doing wrong in this scenario, why I'm breaking things. It's so interesting. So unlike the, let's see, if I go here, you can't loop this like you can't loop keyframes like you can the brush animation. So what you have to do is make a new sequence layer, and then move your caret into there, and then select your sequence layer and set to loop at playhead, so wherever your playhead is. So since we animated a 2, so now I can go to the stop or the start and have it, and now it's like a loop. Excuse me. So that's your transform keyframes. What's cool is that you could have been drawing and have a bunch of animation happening on that layer, and then have it translate and move in space, which is really cool. And that could be, you know, that's a group, so that could be like a ton of things. Like you could animate his little carrot top moving, his legs, hands, all that. You could do all the different animation and then have that all move as a group, translate as a group, which is pretty cool. And you could rotate, scale, those different things. What's also cool is that you could, now that I have this as a group, we're going to just call this O1, just so we have a easy reference. You could just duplicate this, and then I could grab that transform and move them over, and then it duplicates all the animation, so whatever was inside of that layer duplicate, and then all of a sudden you have a carrot army, which is cool. Can I select? You could also just select him and move him around and duplicate him a ton of times. And again, everything that is in that group is moving together. But what's cool is you could also say I had this clip here and I wanted to offset it. I could just slide it, and you can see this guy over here is on different timing. So I've taken that same animation and just offset it. So there's definitely a lot of cool animation tools. This is something that I'm still like learning and trying to figure out. But yeah, so this is Quill. That was a super long way of saying this is Quill. Yeah, there is a lot that you can do. It's pretty rad. You can bring in models, you could sketch on them, you could paint. I could open up one where I brought in here's a landscape. That's massive. But if I zoom out here, you can also hold your middle finger in and just press out on the joystick, and you can zoom out. So this is, I was trying to paint on top of a landscape. So if I go to my, I have a mesh here. If I hide everything else, you can see I brought in an OBJ for this landscape as reference. I was telling people, this is like my example of like, I was having a hard time to scale, like drawing scale in a design frame. So what I found to be amazing about this was that I could come in and be like, oh, well, you know, I thought this, you know, oh, hold on, I'm on a layer here. You're like, you know, I was trying to draw a design frame and I thought this was my framing, and I was wondering why the scale wasn't right. But then, you know, you actually come in here and you get at the scale that you're supposed to be, and then all of a sudden, you know, you're like, oh, my framing wasn't feeling epic and grand because I wasn't at the, you know, it didn't feel right. So then you get here and you're like, oh, like this is my framing, and like that's what I needed to do to make things feel really big. And actually, you know, like the detail of like rocks needed to be like this size, and you know, a person needs to be like this big. Then you kind of have a greater sense of like scale and space. So I think this is like could be helpful for even like storyboarding. If you weren't interested in animating, you could kind of come in here and figure out like, okay, that's where my first shot is, and the camera's gonna move over here, and we're gonna, you know, do a 180, and then the camera's gonna see from this way, and we're gonna do a framing like that. And all suddenly, you know, we have another person in the foreground over here like waving, and then now you can kind of have this like sense of relationship with your scene and scale size. But also, you know, maybe this isn't the best example, but you know, like start figuring out like stylistically what that could look like too. Some clouds and sky and fake environment. So again, that's bringing in an object, an OBJ to reference. And then here is, let's see, doodles. Let's see what this one is. I have all these greatly named. Oh, this one is like trying to just start figuring out how to draw like the inside of a interior ship that I was looking at. And you know, it's kind of cool because you get this unique perspective of like being able to be inside of your model and kind of figure out like what that might look like. Here's some frame by frame animation that I was trying to figure out. Simple, it's dumb. Ships flying. Ooh, this one's heavy. I duplicated the layer a bunch of times and then it slowed down a lot. But let's see if I hit play. I don't know. Oh, there it is. I don't know why this is oh, again, the mouse. Let's stop. So, oh, let me turn off this fog layer. Let's go down to 1. Alright, so there's one layer of ships. So I was trying to draw this like kind of stylized looking ship and I forgot to draw the bottom. I drew 1/2 and mirrored it, and then I did kind of like a frame by frame animation for the exhaust coming out. And then like I showed in the other animation, I took keyframes, a start and end point, and then looped that. You can kind of see how, let's see here, let's see which car is in front of me. So this one, I can just look at what is all in here. So I have the inks on top of the car. I have the glass, which I spelled wrong, the flame on the back, and then kind of the base of the car, ship, whatever. And then the keyframes, the translate keyframes are on this group, and then I put that inside another one just so I could offset them in time so they weren't all animating at the same. So they kind of just like moved across at different times, and then I painted and kind of animated the light strokes moving across the surface of them. So yeah, that's that. Let's see if I have any other. This one is the scene that I brought into Redshift and rendered, if you saw on my Instagram. This is, you know, just kind of sketching and drawing in Quill. So same thing, we can kind of take a look at my unnamed layers in here. There's some, let's move this over here. This is the white lines that were around him. This is the outline overall. This is the whites from the snake thing. His eyes, his mouth, I would assume. Or no, it's his face. The fill of him. The ink of the tree, I would guess. Environment. The grass. The other grass. The tree stump. Light. I was trying to paint light and I didn't think it was working very well, so I turned it off. And the ground. And then there was like my original sketch up here of just like how I was blocking it out and figuring out what I was going to actually draw. So yeah, so that's kind of this. That's my light direction. Learned that from people trying to figure out where to draw your light and shadow from. Yep, so that's that. I don't really know what other scenes that I could open up that would be like informational. Like I don't think there's any others that have like OBJs or anything in them. What is cat? Oh, this is like another character trying to draw illustration. Playing with the additive modes on the brushes, and there's kind of like transparency for his helmet and little boots and some atmospheric stuff around him, shooting stars. Yeah, I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else that's like really cool or worth looking at apart from those. And this TV one's kind of fun. I showed a video of this on Instagram as well where
I was trying to not use outlines and only do my character and kind of draw. If I turn on the mesh on this, you can kind of see, again, it's really helpful for that mesh to kind of figure out if you're drawing like where your cursor is at and where your lines are existing, so you can kind of fill out that form better. It depends on your drawing style, but yeah, that's what was working for me. Yeah, that's it. So I think that's a huge look at Quill and a tiny look at Medium, but people are making cool stuff. I haven't got there yet. I just started learning probably like a week and a half ago or something, but interested to keep going and pushing things. And again, also the beauty of all of this is that you can also go to export 3D file and take that into your favorite 3D program and render and shade it and light it to your liking. There's lots of cool capture tools. You can, you have a camera, handheld camera to capture, so if you wanted to get some cool camera angles and record them, that's really fun. And it's kind of like editing, so you can kind of shoot one angle and then as soon as you stop and release, like here, I'll just show real quick. So you could shoot this angle for a couple frames. Oops, sorry, I wasn't doing capture video. You could shoot this angle for a couple frames and then switch to a different angle and shoot that. And then when you hit save, it actually stitches both of those together into one clip. So yeah, so that's it. I'm going to quit out. Thanks for watching. If you have any other detailed questions, I'm happy to help, but hopefully that was informational. Thanks.